deep waters of the primordial sea churned with a rage that had festered since the day Anzu fell. In the heart of that endless abyss, Tiamat, the goddess of wrath and the chaotic sea, brooded over her brother's death. The pain of her loss was a wound that refused to heal, festering into a bitterness that twisted her thoughts until there was no room left for anything but vengeance. Marduk had overstepped his bounds, she told herself. The supreme god had become a tyrant, ruling with an iron fist, meting out punishment without mercy, and executing Anzu without hesitation. Marduk claimed he acted in the name of order, but to Tiamat, it was tyranny disguised as justice. The balance of the divine realms was precarious, and she could no longer bear to see it tipped by Marduk's heavy hand. She would have her vengeance, but more than that, she would overthrow him and restore what she believed to be the rightful order of the cosmos. Tiamat knew she could not confront Marduk alone, even in her wrathful might. Marduk was powerful, his authority unquestioned by most of the divine race. But there were others among the gods who harbored their own doubts and grievances. If she could bring them to her side, she might stand a chance against the tyrant. The gathering of allies. Tiamat's first target was Ishtar, the goddess of love, war, and fertility. Ishtar was a complex deity, her passions running deep and her loyalties ever-shifting. She was revered by mortals and gods alike, but she also knew the fickleness of love and the fleeting nature of power. In her private moments, she had often wondered if Marduk's rule was as benevolent as it seemed. In a hidden valley, where the veil between the heavens and the earth was thin, Tiamat sought out Ishtar. The goddess was there, wandering amidst the flowers that bloomed in eternal twilight, her golden hair cascading like rivers of sunlight. But as Tiamat approached, the flowers seemed to wither, their colors draining away, leaving the landscape barren and desolate. Ishtar, Tiamat's voice was a low, sibilant hiss, like the waves crashing against the shores of a forgotten land. "We must speak." Ishtar turned, her eyes narrowing as she beheld Tiamat's approach. "Tiamat," she said, her voice laced with caution. "What brings you to this place of peace? Your presence darkens the light." Tiamat smiled, a thin, sharp smile that held no warmth. "I have come to speak of justice, of vengeance. You have seen what Marduk has done. He claims to bring order, but he sows only fear and death. My brother, Anzu, fell to his wrath, and now I seek to balance the scales." Ishtar's gaze grew cold, her eyes hardening as she remembered the stories of Anzu's execution. "Anzu betrayed the gods," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "Marduk did what he believed was necessary. Did he?" Tiamat's voice was a venomous whisper. "Or has he grown too accustomed to his power? Anzu made a mistake, yes, but was it one that warranted his death? Marduk acted out of pride, not justice. And it will not end with Anzu. Who will be next? You? Me? We must stop him before he destroys us all." Ishtar looked away, her mind churning with doubt. She had seen Marduk's growing arrogance, his willingness to use force to maintain his rule. But to betray him, to rise against the supreme god, it was unthinkable. And yet, Tiamat stepped closer, her voice low and persuasive. "Ishtar, you know what it is to love and to lose. You know the pain of injustice, the sting of betrayal. Stand with me, and together we can bring down the tyrant. We can restore balance to the cosmos and ensure that no other god suffers as Anzu did." Ishtar closed her eyes, a deep sigh escaping her lips. When she opened them again, they were filled with a steely resolve. "I will join you, Tiamat. For the sake of love and for the sake of justice. Marduk's rule must end." Tiamat's next target was Enlil, the god of wind and storms, the lord of the gods, second only to Marduk in power. Enlil was a being of immense strength, his moods as unpredictable as the weather he commanded. He had always been a staunch supporter of order, but recent events had shaken his faith in Marduk's leadership. Tiamat found Enlil in the highest peaks of the heavens, where the air was thin and the clouds swirled like a maelstrom. The winds howled around him as he stood atop a mountain, his gaze turned towards the distant horizon. Enlil, Tiamat's voice cut through the howling wind, reaching the god's ears with a clarity that defied the storm. I have come to speak of a great injustice. Enlil turned, his eyes flashing like lightning as he regarded Tiamat with suspicion. Tiamat, he rumbled, his voice as deep as thunder. What brings you to my domain? Speak quickly, for I have no patience for trickery. There is no trickery here, Tiamat replied, her tone measured and calm. Only truth. Marduk has overstepped his bounds. He has become a tyrant, ruling with fear and force. And Zu's death was only the beginning. If we do not act, his wrath will consume us all. Enlil's expression darkened as he recalled the news of Enzu's execution. It had troubled him, yes, but he had dismissed it as the necessary action of a ruler. But now, hearing Tiamat's words, the doubt that had been gnawing at the edges of his mind began to take root. And what do you propose? Enlil asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Would you have us overthrow Marduk? Do you truly believe we can succeed? We must, Tiamat insisted, her eyes burning with determination. We are the only ones who can. Ishtar has already agreed to join me. With your power, we can challenge Marduk and end his reign of terror. We can restore balance to the cosmos. Enlil was silent for a long moment, his gaze turned inward as he weighed Tiamat's words. He had always been a protector of order, a guardian of the divine laws. But was Marduk truly upholding those laws, or was he twisting them to suit his own ends? Finally, Enlil nodded, a grim resolve settling over him. Very well, Tiamat. I will stand with you. Marduk must answer for his actions. Tiamat smiled, a fierce, triumphant smile. Then it is settled. Together, we will bring down the tyrant and reclaim our place as the true rulers of the cosmos. The Serpent strikes. With her allies gathered, Tiamat set her plan into motion. The heavens themselves seemed to tremble as the three gods, Tiamat, Ishtar, and Enlil, prepared to confront Marduk. The balance of the cosmos hung by a thread, the tension so thick it could be cut with a blade. In the heart of Eridu, the celestial city where the gods made their home, Marduk sat upon his golden throne, his mind preoccupied with the responsibilities of rulership. He was a god of order, a force of stability in an ever-changing universe. But beneath the surface of his calm exterior, there was a growing sense of unease. He had felt the shifting currents of divine power, the subtle tremors that signaled a disturbance in the fabric of reality. His unease turned to alarm as the great doors of his palace were flung open, and Tiamat strode into the hall, flanked by Ishtar and Enlil. The air crackled with energy as the three gods confronted him, their eyes burning with a fierce determination. Marduk, Tiamat's voice was a hiss, filled with venom. Your reign of tyranny ends today. Marduk rose from his throne, his golden eyes narrowing as he looked upon the three gods before him. Tiamat, he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. What is the meaning of this? Why do you come before me with such hostility? You know why, Tiamat snarled, her voice rising like the waves of a storm-tossed sea. You murdered my brother, Enzu, in cold blood. You have overstepped your bounds, and now, you will pay the price for your arrogance. Marduk's gaze flicked to Ishtar and Enlil, his expression hardening as he realized the gravity of the situation. And you, he said, his voice cold as ice. You would betray me, your king, to stand with this serpent? Have you lost all sense of reason? Ishtar stepped forward, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. Marduk, you have changed, she said quietly. You were once a wise and just ruler, but now I fear you have become something else. Something dangerous. We cannot stand by and watch as you destroy the balance we have fought so hard to maintain. Enlil's voice was like the rumble of distant thunder, deep and powerful. You have strayed from the path of justice, Marduk. You have become a tyrant, and it is our duty to stop you before it is too late. Marduk's eyes blazed with fury as he looked upon his former allies. You dare to challenge me, he growled, his voice filled with a righteous anger. You think you can stand against the might of the supreme god? I will not be overthrown by traitors and fools. Tiamat's smile was cold and cruel as she raised her hand, summoning the dark waters of the primordial sea. We will see who is the fool, Marduk, she hissed. Prepare yourself, for the battle to come will be unlike anything you have ever faced. The battle of the gods. The sky above Eridu darkened, the clouds swirling into a massive vortex as the storm of battle began to brew. The very air seemed to shudder with the force of the divine powers being unleashed, and the ground beneath the gods' feet trembled as if in fear. Tiamat was the first to strike, her form shifting into that of a monstrous serpent, her scales glistening like black ice. With a roar that shook the heavens, she lunged at Marduk, her jaws wide open, ready to devour him whole. Marduk reacted swiftly, summoning his divine weapon, the Imhullu, a windstorm so fierce it could tear the stars from the sky. The storm met Tiamat's attack head-on, the winds howling as they clashed with the dark waters of the primordial sea. The two forces collided with a thunderous crash, sending shockwaves rippling through the heavens. Ishtar was next, her eyes blazing with the light of 1,000 suns as she called upon the power of both love and war. She moved with the grace of a dancer, her every motion a blur of speed and precision as she struck at Marduk with her divine weapons. Her arrows, tipped with the fire of passion, streaked through the air like comets, each one aimed with deadly accuracy. But Marduk was ready. With a flick of his wrist, he summoned the enchanted net, a weapon woven from the very fabric of order, designed to entrap even the mightiest of beings. The net flashed out, seeking to ensnare Ishtar, but the goddess was too quick. She leaped back, the net missing her by a hair's breadth, and retaliated with a flurry of blows that left the air crackling with energy. Enlil, watching the battle unfold, felt the storm within him grow. His eyes darkened like the skies before a tempest, and with a mighty roar, he unleashed the full fury of the wind and storm. Lightning flashed across the sky, the bolts splitting the air with deafening cracks as they rained down upon Marduk. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at the very foundations of the celestial city, while the thunder boomed with the force of 1,000 drums. Marduk, his body glowing with the light of the sun, stood tall amidst the onslaught. With a command, he summoned the Tablet of Destinies, the artifact that gave him dominion over the fates of gods and men alike. The tablet hovered before him, its inscriptions glowing with a golden light as it channeled the power of the universe itself. I am the supreme god. Marduk's voice thundered across the battlefield, his words resonating with the authority of one who had shaped the very fabric of reality. You cannot defeat me. The cosmos bends to my will. But Tiamat was not deterred. With a hiss, she unleashed a torrent of dark water, the primordial chaos from which all things had sprung. The water surged towards Marduk, engulfing him in a deluge that threatened to drown even the mightiest of gods. But Marduk raised the Imhullu once more, the storm winds tearing through the waters, pushing them back with a force that defied the natural order. For 7 days and 7 nights, the battle raged on, the heavens themselves torn asunder by the fury of the gods. The sky was lit with a constant flicker of lightning, the clouds roiling like a boiling sea as the gods clashed with a force that shook the very foundations of the universe. Tiamat's wrath was unrelenting, her every strike fueled by the grief and rage that burned within her. She fought with the ferocity of a storm-tossed ocean, her attacks relentless as she sought to bring Marduk to his knees. Her serpentine form twisted and coiled through the air, her jaws snapping at the god of order, seeking to tear him apart. Ishtar was a blur of motion, her weapons flashing like the rays of the sun as she struck at Marduk from every angle. Her arrows of passion and her sword of love both sang with the fervor of battle, and her war cry echoed across the battlefield, a song of both creation and destruction. Enlil's storm raged on, the winds tearing at the heavens, the lightning flashing like the judgment of the gods. He moved with the power of a hurricane, his attacks relentless as he sought to break through Marduk's defenses. But Marduk stood firm, his power a beacon of light amidst the chaos. The Tablet of Destinies pulsed with a golden light, its inscriptions glowing with the power of the cosmos as Marduk channeled its energy. The Imhullu swirled around him, the storm winds deflecting the attacks of his enemies, pushing them back with a force that defied the very laws of nature. The battle was evenly matched, the forces of order and chaos locked in a struggle that seemed to have no end. Neither side could gain the upper hand, their powers so vast, so terrible, that the very universe itself seemed to tremble in fear. On the seventh night, the battle reached its peak. The heavens were torn asunder, the stars themselves flickering as the gods clashed with a force that defied description. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and burning metal, the ground scorched by the fury of the divine powers that had been unleashed. Tiamat, her form battered but unbroken, lunged at Marduk with a roar that shook the heavens. Her jaws snapped at the god of order, her fangs seeking to tear him apart. But Marduk met her charge head-on, the Imholu swirling around him in a maelstrom of wind and light. The two forces collided with a thunderous crash, the impact sending shockwaves rippling through the air, tearing at the very fabric of reality. Ishtar and Enlil pressed the attack, their weapons flashing as they struck at Marduk with all the power they could muster. But Marduk was unyielding, his power a bulwark against the storm of chaos that threatened to overwhelm him. The battle continued, the gods locked in a struggle that seemed to have no end. For every blow that was struck, there was a counterstrike. For every advance, there was a retreat. The balance of power shifted back and forth, with no clear victor emerging from the chaos. As the dawn of the eighth day approached, the gods stood exhausted but defiant, their bodies battered and bruised, but their spirits unbroken. The battle had taken its toll on all of them, and yet, they knew that it was far from over. The flame of dominion. The heavens trembled under the weight of the impending cataclysm, the very fabric of the cosmos stretched thin as the battle between the gods reached its climax. Marduk, the supreme god, stood at the heart of the celestial battlefield, his golden eyes blazing with a fury that matched the intensity of the storm swirling around him. Before him, the three gods, Tiamat, Ishtar, and Enlil, prepared to launch their final, desperate assault. The sky was a maelstrom of dark clouds and seething winds, torn apart by the conflicting powers of order and chaos. The ground beneath their feet cracked and splintered, sending shards of divine stone spiraling into the void. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, and the very stars seemed to flicker as if they too feared the outcome of this battle. Tiamat, the embodiment of the primordial sea, her form a monstrous serpent of swirling waters and shifting scales, hissed with a venom that dripped from every word. Marduk, your reign ends today. You will pay for the blood of my brother, and for the tyranny you have wrought upon the gods. Ishtar, the goddess of love, war, and fertility, her eyes burning with a mixture of passion and rage, echoed Tiamat's resolve. You were once the light of the heavens, Marduk, but now you are a shadow that blots out the stars. We will no longer be ruled by your fear and pride. Enlil, the god of wind and storms, his voice a deep rumble that resonated through the churning skies, added his weight to the confrontation. You have lost the path of justice, Marduk. This battle is not just for us, but for the balance of the universe itself. We will not let you continue unchecked. Marduk's expression hardened, his resolve unshakable despite the enormity of the forces arrayed against him. His heart pounded with the weight of the cosmos resting upon his shoulders, yet he knew that this was a burden only he could bear. The survival of the divine order depended on his victory. Fools, Marduk's voice boomed across the battlefield, echoing like the roar of 1,000 storms. You seek to overthrow me, but you do not understand the consequences of your actions. The cosmos itself would unravel without my guidance. Your defiance will bring only ruin. With that, the final battle began. The Clash of Titans. The heavens erupted as the four gods clashed, their powers colliding with a force that sent shockwaves through the universe. Marduk surged forward, his form a blur of golden light as he met the combined onslaught of Tiamat, Ishtar, and Enlil. Tiamat unleashed the full fury of the primordial sea, waves of dark water crashing against Marduk with the weight of millennia behind them. The serpent's maw gaped wide, her fangs dripping with venom as she sought to tear him apart. The waters roared, rising and falling like a tempest that threatened to swallow the supreme god whole. Ishtar danced through the chaos, her movements a deadly ballet of war and love. Her weapons, the bow of desire and the sword of passion, flashed with a brilliant light as they sought out Marduk's heart. Each strike was fueled by the fire of creation, a force that could birth worlds or bring them to ruin. Enlil called upon the power of the storm, the winds howling and the lightning cracking as he joined the fray. Bolts of divine lightning arced through the sky, striking at Marduk with the force of 1,000 storms. The very air vibrated with the raw energy of the wind god's fury. But Marduk stood his ground, his power a bulwark against the combined might of his enemies. With a sweep of his hand, he called forth the Imhulu, the divine storm that had vanquished countless foes before. The winds howled at his command, pushing back against the waves of Tiamat's chaos, scattering Ishtar's arrows, and deflecting Enlil's lightning. The battlefield was a seething cauldron of energy, the sky ablaze with the clashing powers of the gods. The ground trembled as the titanic forces tore at the fabric of reality, creating rifts in the heavens through which the very essence of the cosmos spilled out. Marduk's eyes blazed with an inner fire as he fought with all his strength, but even he could feel the strain of the battle. The three gods pressed him from all sides, their attacks relentless, their determination unyielding. For the first time, Marduk felt the weight of doubt creeping into his mind. Could he truly hold back the combined might of these powerful deities? Then, in a moment of desperation, Marduk made his move. With a roar that shook the heavens, he summoned all the power at his command and unleashed it in a single, devastating strike. The Imhulu roared to life, the wind swirling into a massive vortex that tore through the battlefield, creating a vacuum of pure destruction. The collision of powers was cataclysmic. A shockwave erupted from the point of impact, sending ripples through the fabric of the cosmos itself. The explosion that followed was like nothing the universe had ever witnessed, a blinding flash of light and heat that consumed everything in its path. The birth of the fire. The light of the explosion was blinding, hotter than the sun, brighter than two planets colliding. It was a light so intense that even the gods were forced to shield their eyes from its brilliance. For a moment, all was lost in that searing radiance, the battlefield obscured by a conflagration that seemed to burn away reality itself. Tiamat, Ishtar, and Enlil staggered back, their senses overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the blast. They could feel the heat of the fire against their skin, a searing, burning sensation that threatened to consume them. The air was filled with the crackling of flames, the roar of the inferno drowning out all other sounds. Marduk, however, did not falter. In the heart of the explosion, he saw it, a flame, burning with a light that was neither of the heavens nor of the earth. It was a fire born from the collision of divine powers, a force that had never before existed in the cosmos. It was pure, unbridled energy, a flame that could reshape the very fabric of reality. Realizing the great potential of this fire, Marduk knew that he could not let it escape his grasp. With a swift motion, he raised his arm and summoned the fire to him. The flames leapt towards him, swirling around his form like a living thing, and with a single, decisive act, Marduk captured the fire into his sleeve. The flames coiled around his arm, their light dimming as they were drawn into the folds of his robe, until at last, they were hidden from view. Marduk felt the power of the fire thrumming through him, a new and potent force that he could barely contain. It was a power unlike anything he had ever wielded before, a fire that could destroy or create with equal ease. But there was no time to dwell on the fire's potential. The three gods, Tiamat, Ishtar, and Enlil, were still before him, though they were no longer the fierce adversaries they had been moments before. The fall of the gods. The explosion had left the three gods gravely wounded, their divine forms battered and broken by the force of the blast. Tiamat lay coiled upon the ground, her serpentine body scorched and smoking, her scales cracked and bleeding. Ishtar, her once radiant beauty marred by the burns and wounds that covered her body, struggled to rise, her weapons shattered and useless at her side. Enlil, the mighty storm god, knelt upon the ground, his strength sapped by the fire that had torn through him, his lightning flickering weakly around him. Marduk looked down upon them, his expression inscrutable as he regarded the fallen gods. These were no mere enemies, these were the greatest of the divine race, gods who had once stood by his side, who had shared in the creation and governance of the cosmos. They were not like Enzu, whose betrayal had been clear and unforgivable. These three were essential to the balance of the universe, their roles too important to simply erase. But their defiance could not go unpunished. With a heavy heart, Marduk spoke, his voice echoing through the silent battlefield. You sought to overthrow me, to break the divine order and cast the cosmos into chaos. For this, you must be punished. But unlike Enzu, I cannot kill you. The roles you play in the cosmos are too vital, and your destruction would only bring further imbalance. The three gods looked up at him, their expressions a mixture of pain and defiance. Tiamat's eyes burned with a deep, seething hatred, while Ishtar's gaze was filled with sorrow and regret. Enlil's expression was one of resignation, the storm within him quelled by the knowledge of their defeat. Marduk raised his hand, his golden eyes glowing with the light of the captured fire. You are banished, he declared, his voice ringing with the finality of a divine decree. You will no longer walk the halls of the celestial city, nor will you have a voice in the governance of the cosmos. You are exiled from the kingdom of the gods, cast out into the void to wander the dark corners of the universe, far from the light of the heavens. With those words, the power of Marduk's decree took hold. The air around the three gods shimmered and warped, the fabric of reality bending to the will of the supreme god. A wind, cold and unyielding, rose up from the ground, swirling around Tiamat, Ishtar, and Enlil, lifting them from the earth and carrying them into the sky. Tiamat, her body writhing in agony, let out a hiss of rage that echoed across the battlefield. This is not the end, Marduk, she cried, her voice filled with venom. You may have defeated us today, but we will return. The cosmos will not be yours forever. Ishtar, her eyes filled with tears, looked upon Marduk one last time. I loved you once, Marduk, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. But that love has turned to ashes. I will never forgive you for this. Enlil remained silent, his expression unreadable as he was carried away by the winds. His thoughts were a storm of conflicting emotions, but he knew that their exile was just. They had challenged Marduk and had lost. Now, they would face the consequences. The wind carried the three gods higher and higher, until at last, they disappeared from sight, swallowed by the darkness of the void. Marduk watched them go, his heart heavy with the weight of what had transpired. The battle had been won, but the victory was a hollow one. The cosmos was secure, for now, but the price had been steep. The aftermath. The battlefield was silent, the heavens still trembling from the aftershocks of the divine conflict. The sky was dark, the clouds roiling like the surface of a storm-tossed sea. The stars, once bright and steady, flickered uncertainly, as if unsure of their place in the new order that had been forged. Marduk stood alone, the fire of the cosmos hidden within his sleeve, its power thrumming through him like a heartbeat. He could feel its potential, its raw, untamed energy waiting to be unleashed. It was a power unlike any he had ever known, a force that could reshape the universe in his image. But Marduk knew that such power came with great responsibility. The fire was a double-edged sword, a tool that could bring creation as easily as it could bring destruction. It was a force that could not be wielded lightly, for to do so would risk unbalancing the very cosmos he had fought so hard to protect. As he stood upon the battlefield, Marduk's thoughts turned to the future. The battle had revealed the fractures within the divine order, the growing discontent among the gods. The universe was vast, its forces complex and ever-changing. The balance he had sought to maintain was precarious, and he knew that this was only the beginning. Tiamat's words echoed in his mind, a reminder that the conflict was far from over. The banished gods would return one day, seeking revenge for their defeat, and when they did, the cosmos would once again be thrown into turmoil. Marduk's gaze hardened, his resolve firming within him. He would be ready. The fire within his sleeve was his to command, and with it, he would ensure that the balance of the universe was maintained, no matter the cost. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with danger, but Marduk would not falter. The supreme god turned away from the battlefield, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The fire of dominion burned within him, its light a beacon of power and authority. The cosmos was his to govern, and he would rule it with the strength and wisdom that only he possessed. As Marduk walked through the silent halls of the celestial city, the weight of his victory and the burden of his power settled upon him like a mantle. The universe had been preserved, but the echoes of the battle would linger for eons to come. In the darkness of the void, the three banished gods would plot their return, their hatred of Marduk burning like a flame that could not be extinguished. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. And Marduk, the supreme god, would be ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. In the stillness of the celestial city, Marduk's footsteps echoed through the empty halls, a reminder that even the mightiest of gods could walk alone.